What are the biggest issues right now with the Minnesota Vikings when it comes to the film? Luke Braun's going to join me here in a couple of minutes, and we are going to have a really good conversation. Jaylen Redmond might be the best player in this defense, not named Jonathan Grenard. Why is the middle of the field such an issue? And center, should Blake Brandel continue getting the start, or should we go to Michael Juergens? We're going to talk about all that and a lot about J.J. McCarthy here on X's and SKOLs.
X's and SKOLs with Tyler Forness and Luke Braun, dissecting the All-22 for your Minnesota Vikings.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of X's and SKOLs. I am Tyler Forness. Producer Dave is in the bottom right corner, rocking his purple hoodie. Luke will be joining us here momentarily. And we have a very interesting show here today. A nice little lunchtime film talk and getting ready for this Sunday's game against the Detroit Lions. Dave, it's a very interesting one for this Minnesota Vikings team because it feels like the sky has fallen and a natural disaster has hit the Minnesota Vikings. But it's not necessarily supposed to be this dire thing either. The vibes are terrible, but they have the ability to kind of dig themselves out of this hole that they made for themselves. And some of that has been self-inflicted. Some of that has just been injury luck. And that's just kind of how things are going to live for a little while. And I'm very interested to see how this continues to grow and develop over the course of the next few weeks. And we're going to have an interesting conversation today as we wait for Luke Braun to join here. How are you, sir?
I'm doing all right. Prepping for tonight's show.
Yes. Tonight's show, the Real Forno Show. Make sure you tap in live, 6:05 Central Time, our normal time on Thursday. And we're going to have a lot here for you today. As we continue to wait for Luke, I'm very curious about a lot of things that Luke saw in the film because he's done a lot of really good breakdowns. And I think the best place to kind of start, Dave, is Jaylen Redmond. I think it's undeniable at this point. Jaylen Redmond might be the second best player on this defense, and the only one better being Jonathan Grenard. He's incredible. The story of, hey, he was a really good player at Oklahoma, but he fell in the draft due to some medical concerns. I believe it was blood clots. I'm not 100% sure, but stuff like that. Sometimes it ends up being a humongous deal. Sometimes it ends up being really not that big of a deal at all because it's manageable with medications. Stuff like blood thinners, yada, yada. And he doesn't get drafted. He doesn't make the Carolina Panthers. Has a good year with the Arlington Renegades in the spring of 24. The Vikings signed him as the 90th guy. He plays so well in training camp that he earns a roster spot. And then he earned a starting spot at the end of the year over Jerry Tillery. Then going into this year, he played so well during camp that they decided, hey, we're going to trade away Harrison Phillips. And by trading away Harrison Phillips, you essentially made Jaylen Redmond a starter. Not only has he done that, but he's worked his way up to being the guy on the interior. And speaking of the guy on the interior, it's one of the best trench people in all of Vikings media. He is Luke Braun, built like a podcaster, but he's got the fortitude of a stud defensive tackle. How are you, sir?
You know, I'm transitioning from podcaster build a little closer to, an O-line build. Trying to fight that tide, but, time comes for us all.
It does come for us all. Hey, speaking of O-line build, I am 6'6", 330 pounds. I am Christian Darrisaw if he was fat, unathletic, and white. That is me.
Well, I can't get the height. I think I'm done with that, but, we're working hard on everything else.
Congratulations. You are Willie Lampkin. That is your new goal, Luke. But I started the show talking about Jaylen Redmond and his kind of journey from being overlooked in the NFL draft, mainly due to medical, to not making the Panthers, going through the UFL. And all of a sudden, I don't think it may be a hot take, but I don't think it is. I think he's the second best player in this defense behind Jonathan Grenard. And maybe once Van Ginkel returns, we have to reframe that conversation. But he's playing such great football that it's hard to have a conversation where you're not talking about him in that kind of light anymore.
Yeah, but you're debating like Byron Murphy and Isaiah Rodgers and stuff. He's the best guy on the Like he's been the most productive guy in the D line, which bears out when you look at the tape. I just did a Patreon video on him. Yeah, no, he's just kind of like pretty good at playing D line. He's knifing through a lot of these gaps. He does a really great job of that, like deny the reach when anybody tries to run like outside zone. Basically, they're just lining him up, like head up on somebody. And he's really got a great feel for like, is this play going left or right? So like as he feels the lineman in front of him go left, does a really good job of taking a bigger lateral step and then using that feel to like kind of reflexively go the right way and taking that lateral step and then getting his shoulder skinny to knife through. And then you end up getting penetration, and he's blown up a bunch of zone runs that way. Like you might remember, a big TFL against like, I think Cleveland, one against like Philly that, and then even like one of the only good plays that happened against the Chargers, you might remember him just kind of like teleporting into the backfield. That's what he's doing. He's winning a lot with get off and a lot with just being really explosive right off the snap, especially against less experienced linemen that like aren't building their house very fast or aren't getting set up very fast. And he's not like snap timing, right? Like he's just getting off the ball really fast, really explosively, and plays really strong ball too. Like he blows up some guys sometimes.
I recommend you go check out Luke's Patreon. The cool part about it is it's kind of how we approach this show. It's for all age and experience levels. You'll learn something and you'll enjoy yourself. Patreon.com/Luke Braun NFL. I love the Redmond video. I just think this guy he is the bee's knees, as they would have said back in the 1950s. One question
they can't let him walk, right? Like this dude's like, I keep waiting to wake up to the thing that says like they extended him because he's a starter now. Like he took over Javon Hargrave's job snap wise.
So the good part about it is he can't leave unless the Vikings say you can go, because he's
on his ERF.
He's
playing on it right now.
He is playing on it, but he's only going to have 2 years of service time. So he's going to be an exclusive rights free agent again this offseason. And then
because the first year doesn't count.
Yep.
Oh.
So he's going to be an exclusive rights free agent again. And then he'll be an unrestricted free agent after 2026. So he's got team control through 2027. This guy's not going anywhere unless the Vikings tell him to hit the bricks, which at this point, there's no reason to do so.
Yeah, they might get it out of the way early like they did with who was it? I think, if you really think of it like the way they did with Adam Thielen when he was coming off, like before they gave him a real contract, they gave him like a stupid little one.
4 years.
Or like the way they did Metellus.
Yeah.
Like the one they did in like 2018 or 17.
Mm-hmm.
Not the big one. They gave him a big one in 2019 and he was expensive from there on out. But
I think the smart thing to do might be this offseason. Hey, you've got 2 years. You're under team control. The most you can make is it's going to be around $8.5 or $9 million. We'll give you a 2-year deal worth $12 million, and then we'll revisit like a bigger extension down the line, rewarding him for his play. And then hopefully when that bigger extension comes, if this continues, which I mean, he's 25 years old, there's no reason to expect him to have any kind of decline. Then you can potentially get a little bit of a more team-friendly deal because you rewarded him when you didn't have to. Because they could just take him.
Maybe, like a good faith. That's Metellus too, right?
Mm-hmm. We're going to give you a good faith extension, and then you can use that at the bargaining table down the line. One question I have about Redmond kind of before we move on to other topics, because there's some more interesting stuff that I want to dive into. Why does Redmond keep getting unblocked? It's happened a couple times. He's already gotten a couple stacks from it, but it feels like he just absolutely whips the offensive line in front of him. And I think you said it really nicely where they're just not building their house fast enough, which is essentially just getting your base underneath you and being ready to take on who's ever in front of you. But it just feels like he's being forgotten in some of these blocking schemes, and how much of that is him versus the offensive line.
Yeah, like first play against the Steelers, he gets that big sack. That's just a bust. That's like the same thing as a coverage bust. Someone was supposed to block him and did the wrong thing, so he just gets like a free run in. Yeah. I think there are a couple that were like traps or screens or where they're kind of letting him in on purpose and stuff. But sometimes it looks like that, and he's really like there is someone that should have blocked him, and he just got off that snap so fast. There is, I think, something to being underestimated. Because he's not the household name, right? He's not the guy that you walk into your room saying we got a game plan for 61, right? Mm-hmm. Who said Redmond is bad? What are you watching, dog? Too Evil, Too Hope. Oh, you were in the squad show chat too. You're having a bad morning. Have a
Two
banana or
Evil's a
something.
good dude. He's
my
in
friend.
our comments and chat a lot.
Yeah, you gotta. It's a little hangry or something. But no, so like, there's something I think to being underestimated is what I was getting at. So like, they will ask linemen to reach block him from alignments that you would never ask if that was like Jalen Carter, if that was like a guy you really respected. Like they will change a little bit of the blocking scheme, or you'll kind of just instruct, hey, like if you are going up against a guy like Jalen Carter, you say, hey, if you see 98, give a little bit of help. Don't leave your teammate one-on-one. But they will leave their teammate one-on-one with Jaylen Redmond, because I just don't think the book is out on him yet. And therefore, you get a lot of situations where you have linemen who are having to like Bradbury style reach across Redmond, and he's just getting off the ball too fast. He's getting through. But there have been a couple where he's just been the beneficiary of good luck insofar as the other team made a mistake and he was the guy that was left alone.
I wonder, and maybe some of this, Luke, is just because of how fans perceive it, because in all reality, jersey numbers don't matter. But do you think maybe there's some of that where, hey, this guy wears 61, nobody would wear 61 if they had a choice? Could that psyche actually play into things?
No, because there's guys in the 50s that are like good. Like, I don't think so. No, I think I don't think it's jersey number psychology. I think it's more that when you look at the Vikings D line, you're going like, oh, that's Jonathan Allen. Oh, that's Jonathan Bernard. You know, we're gonna focus on those guys. Or you're probably more so you're looking at opportunities like, oh, 97 can't hold up on a double. We're going to double him a lot, or, doing whatever you can. A lot of teams are trying to basically throw. Well, Dallas Turner's been on the strong side kind of always, which is, I think, more of the Vikings making that choice than opponents, because they like Dallas Turner trying to go up against tight ends. It's been there. Like they've been trying to find mismatches there. And I think they're right to do that, but they're just not treating Jaylen Redmond like as good of a player as he is. But I think it's more of a specific reputation thing. I think if he's wearing 99, the same thing would be happening.
I want to dive into that just real quick, because if I recall correctly, Jaylen Redmond's been doubled more than Jonathan Allen, and he's won more than Jonathan Allen in those situations. So are they maybe just giving him some of that credit? We're not realizing it, and then all of a sudden he's just being like, it doesn't matter. I'm just that good.
But he's split some doubles too. Like, that's also awesome. Again, it's like the facet of the protection, but I'm more so talking about like run play stuff. Like if you're going to be in a combo block with somebody, and there's a guy between, so you and me, Tyler, we're in a combo block. There's a guy between us, right? And my job is going to be to reach him. Your job is going to be to climb to the linebacker. Let's say that's what the run ID is. If that guy between us is, prime Kenny Clark, you're going to be a little bit more inclined to give me some help, to put your body maybe into that chip a little more, put a little bit more of an arm into him and say, I'll get up to the linebacker later. If that guy is Jaleel Johnson, you're going to be like, you got this, King, right? And you're going to go right up to the linebacker. It's just a bit of a different mentality. And that's the kind of stuff you would talk about in an O-line game plan room, is like, who are the guys that we really need to make sure we're helping each other on? And who are the guys that we can kind of leave ourselves one-on-one with. So it's more about like help in those combos is what I'm talking about. When it comes to protections, he ends up on the slide a lot because the Vikings use him sacrificially a lot. And he's just like splitting those doubles, which is nuts. Like, you're not supposed to be the guy in the backfield, but you are.
Yeah. Daniel, we're going to talk about McCarthy here in a little bit, because there's a lot of interesting stuff to talk about here, but we're going to stick with the defense. And you also did another Patreon video. Please go subscribe to Luke's Patreon. It's one of the best in the business. Talking about how the Vikings just keep getting gashed middle of the field. And that's been a constant ever since Brian Flores took over. My theory has been some of the middle of the field stuff has just been Brian Flores just kind of concedes it to a point where it's the whole death by 1,000 cuts mentality, especially like short and shallow. Be like, okay, we understand that our hole is the middle of the field. And if you want to pepper in 7-yard passes and you can get them off when we blitz and we get pressure, okay, we're just going to kind of live with that. And that's honestly been one of the biggest reasons why the Lions have beaten the Vikings 5 times in a row. What can they do to fix this? Is there any adjustment within the context of how Brian Flores likes to play where they can fix this kind of thing? Or is this just a stubborn trait of Flores where, no, we're just going to keep doing what we're doing, but we just got to get home?
With the Lions, the whole thing has been like you kind of have to just like man up and cover these guys and take away quick options because Goff will get the ball out quickly. But the Vikings have never had the horses to do that. Maybe they feel a little better because Isaiah Rodgers having a good year. They feel good about Murphy. Maybe they feel a little better about manning up. But like that does also mean they can go into 11 personnel and have either a safety on a wide receiver or Dwight McGlothern on a wide receiver and man. Like, you sure you can man up? So that I don't know if that's an option, but it's something we're thinking about. But like, so basically here's what happened in my estimation. Vikings, Eagles, all those double moves, big long balls down the sideline, late scramble drills and stuff. And the Vikings kind of get killed in man coverage, where like a lot of the problems in that Eagles game happened in man coverage, which is again, what are we doing here? With this cornerback room you invested nothing in. But
yeah.
Their answer to that, because all that stuff was on the outside, and like especially what happened on that last play that kind of iced things with Isaiah Rodgers. If you remember, it was a slant and go, sluggo. Rodgers bites on the slant because it's 3rd and 9, and a first down ices the game. So he has to bite on that slant. If he lets that thing get caught, AJ Brown is reaching across the line, and they're converting that for sure. So he has to bite down, and it's a double move, and he gets cooked over the top. I kind of defended him on the Patreon video about that. Because I was like that, like he has to go for that slant. There's like, I do not blame it. Situationally, you cannot like worry about the double move there. And it's a great time for the Eagles to call it for exactly that reason. Good play call. But what it seemed like they did against the Chargers in response is what they'll usually do when they're in quarters. The setup is palmsy a lot of the times. And what palms means when you hear palms, it means different things in a lot of different defenses. But the way I'm using it is that those outside guys, those outside corners, they have a deep quarter, right? Deep man outside and deep, that's their thing. However, if there is something underneath, they can trigger on it. And if they do so, the inside quarter becomes a half safety. And essentially it becomes cover 2 if there's a low route. That's the palms thing. And so what teams have done is essentially those sorts of double moves or things that look like they're out in the flat and then turn up field to essentially coax that corner into jumping it and then turning up field, and it turns into a turkey hole shot with a safety that is not actually dropping to the half safety until that route declares. So you basically can guarantee a late safety and a cover 2 dynamic, and every quarterback loves that throw in the NFL. So what they tried to do was take the linebackers that are usually dropping in the middle of the field and trying to cover things short middle. Yeah, you can check down. We're going to come up and tackle. And it's those million completions that you get for 3 yards to running backs and having those guys drop a little deeper and then having them all be part of the sim pressure all the time too. So these guys are often, sometimes it was, Eric Wilson and Blake Cashman. Sometimes it was Grenard dropping that far, Dallas Turner dropping that far, or Tyler Batty dropping out like that. And so then what you would get is somebody dropping out to the flat outside, but you still have the same quarters dynamic, and it's now just the corners are just playing straight up cover 4. So you have essentially turned it into playing true cover 4 without a hook defender, which is a wide open middle of the field. And to make matters worse, 4 of our defenders are out of the middle entirely. So the only 2 guys that can make the tackle are 2 inside quarter safeties who have dropped to like 25 or 30 yards. And they're the ones coming up and rallying and tackle. So not only is there an uncontested middle of the field completion for Justin Herbert over and over, but there's 15 yards of yak, whether you're a tight end or Ladd McConkey, there's 15 yards of space in front of you before anybody is even contesting you. And then make one of those guys miss and it gets even worse. So like so many times I go like, who was supposed to cover this? And the answer is like nobody. And what I think is that the Vikings tried to make an adjustment to solve a small problem that they had, and they made a huge problem in doing so. And they should probably just say, whoops, that was a oopsie. We shouldn't do that again and go back to the way they were doing things before. But There's also execution mistakes in like Eric Wilson simming and not getting back to his zone fast enough, or Josh Metellus getting back into the zone but overrunning it, and then the ball gets thrown behind him and he should have been in coverage on it, but then he like ran himself out of the play, or biting on stuff they're not supposed to bite on because they don't trust that their teammate has like that will pick it up if they pass off a route, which is kind of a big death knell for a zone defense, is when you stop trusting your teammates, and there's a little bit of that, which is really concerning to me. But at its core, there is this like schematic thing where it's like you're making a stew and you're like, maybe I should add a little bit of sugar to this tomato thing, and you accidentally added way too much sugar and you made it inevitably sweet. Like that's kind of what happened. It's like maybe you just shouldn't have messed around with the sugar in the first place.
The one thing that really has opened my eyes about, this Vikings team doesn't really have the horses per se to run man coverage, but the Lions really don't either, because they're devastated on the back end with injuries, and they just manned up against the Bucs last week on Monday Night Football and just ended up dominating on the back end.
Yeah.
So
well coached.
At a certain point, how concerned should we be about like coaching elements where, you don't want to play a ton of man coverage with these guys because, hey, they may just not have the chops to do it for 70 plays a game. It's not going to be pass every single time, but maybe they just need to, as Blake Cashman said, nut up, play more man coverage, and just kind of see if you can impact something somewhere, because it just feels like unless these guys get home. And one stat I found interesting is year over year, the Vikings pressure to sack ratio is down 12.36%, where they are just not finishing at the quarterback at a similar clip. They actually have more, they're on track for more pressures than last year, but they're getting less sacks. And that's a little bit concerning, because it's not like we're talking they were getting like 25%. They had 14.8% pressures last year, or sacks from pressures. This year it's down to 12.8. Like, it's a significant drop. And I'm wondering if maybe some of the man coverage stuff where you just, hey, keep glued to your guy for 4 seconds. We're only asking for 4 seconds. That's still a lot of time. But if you can do it for 4 seconds, then these guys can get home and really impact Jared Goff. Like, are we at a point where they just have to try it and see what happens?
They have a little. They've run more man this year than they have in the past. And it's been, I think, pretty bad. I think they are at their best when they are playing their brackety zones and giving each other help and playing a communicative, well-coached. I think that's what they've done for 3 years. You have to mix in some. Every defense mixes in some always. So there will always be some, no matter who you are. Sure. But like, I think this has been a season of like the Vikings overcorrecting for stuff. They feel like they're playing whack-a-mole with all their problems. They have, a bad run game, and then they overcommit to the run game and they get killed in the pass. And then they have a bad pass game and they overcommit to their solution to that and they get killed. They go from getting killed on the outside to getting killed over the middle. And getting killed over the middle has been such a problem for Flores' defense anyways, because they very rarely have a center over the ball hook player. They usually will have 2 hook players. In a lot of their favorite coverages all have 2 hook players, and then either a Tampa pull runner who's dropping deeper, and then there's a bit of a dent in the coverage there, or it's like cover 3 rules where you don't have somebody in the dead middle, and if you run an over the ball route between those 2 hook linebackers, you're going to have it. So it's just kind of always there no matter what play call they're in. So I think the solution needs to be something that changes where the seams are. There's going to be seams in every coverage, but like, you imagine you're the Lions, you're coming into this game, you're probably trying to throw over the ball all the time. And you're probably trying to throw to the sideline if you're not throwing over the ball, seeing if you can't catch somebody like Dwight McGlothern in man coverage. So if you change this to say more classic fire zone, which they run some of, but maybe you up the ratio, where you will have somebody over the ball 5 yards deep, taking care of that slant you thought you were hitting. And then you have a low man and a high man on the outsides as well. Well, that'll die to like a skinny post or something like that. That'll get beat by that. but that is an adjustment that the Lions have to make on the fly while you're probably sending 5 as well, because all the coverages I'm talking about today are blitz coverages. And that brings me to kind of the other point. All this stuff works great when the blitz gets home, but like the big long Devonta Smith touchdown is such a perfect example, and more stuff like this happened against the Chargers. They send 6 on that play. Those 6 are the wrong 6. We talked about it last week. And then suddenly you have a 5-man coverage that's expected to just hold up for 3-4 seconds. You send 6, that can no longer be a 2.5 second pocket. The normal standards for time to throw go down and get destroyed when you send 6 and 6 don't get home. Like, it's over. There is nothing that those 5 guys can do to keep up. And to your point about like not converting pressures to sacks, you've had a whole bunch of close calls. Caleb Williams, didn't it feel like he ran around all day? Jalen Hurts felt like he ran around all day and got away from you.
It's running through the
Justin
sacks
Herbert.
to me that's been the biggest problem, because these guys have thick lower bodies. Williams, Hurts, Herbert, all strong dudes. You got Grenard and Jonathan Allen getting hands on these guys, and they just can't bring them down. And that just was not happening very much last season.
Yeah, and they've also had, extra mobile QBs. They had some like statue stuff, some or the mobile QBs were like Will Levis, and it was a little bit easier, and it was a little bit easier to like contain stuff, and they were a little more disciplined about their rush lanes. I think part of this is sort of the secret downside of having a better interior pass rush that can win is that they're going to commit really hard to one gap, and the quarterback can kind of juke that. That's worth it to get more interior pressure for sure, but it is some like a cost that's going to come when versus having like what Harrison Phillips did last year, which was just push the pocket, contain, be in both gaps, clog up the run lanes, and then your edge rushers could cook. It's a different plan, so it's going to look a little different, but it's also, they didn't play Jalen Hurts last year. They didn't play Justin Herbert last year. And those guys have just been evasive, and at a certain point, it's just you got to chase down the dude and get good. Like, you just have to make that tackle. You have to make that play and not get juked out of your shoes every time by a quarterback.
Yeah, I agree completely. I'm interested to see what kind of changeups he has against the Lions, but I want to shift over to the offensive side of the football, Luke. A lot of frustration with this offensive line. There are people in the comments right now saying to fire.
That's all they've talked about.
Yeah, I'm very curious about your thoughts on this offensive line, especially center. My theory is, I think there are good coaches in the room, like Chris Cooper, Wes Phillips, but I'm starting to kind of come to the realization that maybe it's one of those situations where you just need a new voice and you need some new, fresh ideas in the room. And maybe those are 2 spots where you could potentially move on from guys who are good coaches, but sometimes you just need to freshen things up. Where are you kind of at with that idea? And then I definitely want to hear about your thoughts on center, because I know you've come to a realization on what should happen there moving forward.
Well, I guess I can explain it a little better than I used to be able to explain it with like why they're going with Blake Brandel, because that's a question that mystified me for a while. But I just did another Patreon video, which you definitely should go watch. I think that's one that contains the answers that you are looking for. If you care to look for them, you should definitely go check that out. And it sounds like he's going to play again against the Lions. So even if you aren't a patron and you want to just wait, it'll become free after the Lions game. So you can go watch it for free after that, and it'll still be relevant. But it's so hard for me to evaluate Chris Cooper. I've not gotten on this fire Chris Cooper train. I have had a critique of Chris Cooper, but it's a stylistic one, which is that I don't like how much he has the linemen turn their shoulders in pass pro. I don't think that's a good decision. We've talked about this before. There are coaches that are legendary that come from this school of thought. So I'm not ever like, I bring it up a lot, but I never go, and therefore I think he's a bad coach. I just am kind of, I am used to speaking a different language, and I think it's a better language to be speaking, but like half the teams in the NFL run this way. So it's very much a debatable thing, and I just fall on one side of the party line. But that's been my main thing with Chris Cooper, is I just kind of wish he taught it that way. In terms of how guys have come along and developed, the only thing you can really evaluate is Donovan Jackson, who I think is having a very nice rookie year. Certainly not blemishless, but good for a rookie, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But otherwise, I saw a stat today that said that the Vikings have had 12 different O-line combinations that started at least 10 snaps, which is 3 more than the next most team. Everybody's hurt, man. Why are we killing the coach over that? You got Justin School and Blake Brandel at a position he's never played, and Walter Rouse is in there a bunch. Like, we find a coach over all his guys got injured. That seems like the worst guy to go for. Now, the group that is perfectly healthy and everyone is the way they're supposed to be and are also not getting any production out of it is different. We want to talk about how the quarterback development has gone and maybe have a conversation about the quarterback coaching. If, J.J. McCarthy stinks for the next 10 games and you go, what were you doing all those 2 years? We can have that talk. But I'm not firing Chris Cooper because Justin School is bad. Maybe you made a bad depth chart decision, but did Cooper make that decision? Or was he overruled on that? Maybe he wanted to put a young guy in more, and the Vikings seem pretty reticent to do that until they know the young guy is good, which at times has just never happened. I kind of think it's a sophomoric solution to a problem. Everybody gets injured. We want to fire the coach over it. I think I would challenge those in the chat who are saying fire him, fire him, fire him. Do you want to fire him because you think it'll make the O-line better to do so? Or do you just want to see him punished for his sins? Those are different things. And I think a lot of people just want to see him punished for his sins. I really struggle to think a line that has been injured, that has been, getting used to a new combination every 2 seconds, changing who is coaching them in the middle of the year. I struggle to think that will help. I think that would make the problem worse. But it would feel good cathartically, and that's what you want.
Yeah,
exactly. Someone needs to be held accountable. That's not the right heuristic, man. That doesn't make your football team better. It's just good for your fifis.
Yeah, I'm not of the mindset where he needs to be punished for his sins and I just want to see somebody go. I'm looking at a collective approach over the course of the last 4 years and just trying to think to myself, okay, we've had some constants here at these positions, and I'm just thinking maybe a new voice is needed. And the one thing that really got me with Chris Cooper is the hiring this offseason of Keith Carter as the assistant offensive line coach, who has a little bit of a different mentality and approach, almost like either to balance out what Cooper's bringing to the table or to almost light a fire under his ass to where, hey, we need to kind of right this ship on an overall level, because I think that development portion is something that I think you can seriously question with Cooper, especially when you look at a guy like Ed Ingram. And I know the chat's talking about how he's playing much better in Houston, which I do think he's playing better in Houston, but I do think the PFF grades are a little high, so to speak.
They're hiding him, right? The Vikings asked Ingram to be one-on-one all the time. They never really helped him in the protection all that much because they were always helping Bradbury or whatever God forbidden monster disaster was at left guard. They always had bigger problems. So they didn't help Ingram a lot, and I'm assuming that Houston is helping him more, and so you're getting good PFF grades. Because PFF, the way they adjust for difficulty, this is directly from a source in the office, by the way, is that they will adjust for degree of difficulty by kind of removing or downweighting bootlegs or grading screens differently and stuff that's met, or quick game, jump sets and stuff. But they don't really say you were in the slide, therefore we're going to give you a little bit more credit. No, they say, well, an L is an L. And they slid protections toward, or they very often left Ed Ingram on an island, trusted him to win, and then he didn't. Houston is correctly not trusting him to do that and getting a better thing out of him. I would say that is definitely a schematic choice, but that's more on whoever was playing center and the quarterback. Those are the ones making those decisions play to play.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've never been the biggest fan of the cumulative overall grade that the PFF algorithm spits out. I do like the idea of kind of grading each individual play of, hey, how egregious is this? But then compiling it. I think there's some real weight missing behind that official number grade on a 0 to 100 scale, because everybody just kind of views it as gospel. And the one thing with that Ingram has always been, he loses. He doesn't lose necessarily significantly more than other people. It's just his losses look so ugly that I think they get weighted a little bit differently. But I I think we could talk all day about some of this offensive line stuff. I want to focus on the center spot where that Patreon video you did about Blake Brandel. What did you find? I found that he did have a disaster game against the Eagles, but I thought he kind of played a little bit better against the Chargers. But I'm personally not convinced that he should be the guy at center. I think you should really give Juergens a longer look, especially considering what you thought of him pre-draft and how well he did play in his one start this year against the Bengals, albeit a bad defensive line. Where do you come out on this?
So, yeah, the story of Juergens goes, you had a good game against the Bengals. And then you had a half against the Steelers. And then that half was like pretty disastrously bad, but not in as visible a way. He gave up the one sack everybody was mad about, but like, I think most people walk away from that game saying like, okay, but he was a backup and he made a mistake or two, but ultimately he was not the headline out of the Steelers game in the same way Brandel was like a headline coming out of the Eagles game. So you're going like, whatever, right? But what I'll say is when you're IDing who you are supposed to block on a run play, those run IDs there is basically no world where you get to make a mistake in that part. That is again kind of like busting a coverage. Like that should be the basic of basics. Or like a receiver running the wrong route. You would pull that dude immediately if he suddenly was like got the play call wrong and ran a post when he was supposed to run an in. That causes interceptions and big bad stuff, right? Mm-hmm. And Juergens made a mistake of that caliber like 4 times and a half. And I'm gonna guess that the coaches were like, "Screw you, dude! Like this sucks." And it undoes whatever goodwill you had coming off of that Bengals game. Mm-hmm. And what the nature of the problem was, and here's where I think I sort of separate from the Vikings. Seems like the Vikings just said, we don't trust you now. And he was hurt too. So like it kind of, but like, we don't trust you enough to put you in after this hamstring injury, even though he was healthy enough to play. And he did as an emergency backup. But like, that clearly eroded a lot of trust they had in him. And the nature of the problem is uncovered and covered, right? So if you're unfamiliar with zone rules, when you line up, you look to your play side. Is there a guy in my gap on the line? If yes, I am covered and I am blocking that guy, probably in a double team with the next guy. If not, then I'm looking at a linebacker. And there were a few situations where Juergens was very uncovered. Like there wasn't anybody in his gap or in the gap next to him. And so there was clearly nobody to go, no D tackle to go find. And in a lot of those cases, he would go across 2 gaps to find a D tackle to hit before getting up to the linebacker, as though the coaching point was you hit a D tackle, then you hit a linebacker. And he was going so far out of his way to hit that D tackle that he wasn't getting to the linebacker. You should be able to, at the pro level, work through that and make that judgment call of, okay, I don't need to go that far just to put a hand into a guy that's getting blocked by 2 other linemen. I'm just going up to my linebacker. That is a pretty egregious mistake. It's not always that noticeable, but there's like a Patrick Queen TFL you may remember from that Steelers game that happened because of that. Juergens was supposed to block him and just ran completely out of the lane. Mm-hmm. So keep that in mind, that it's like you have a receiver running a bunch of wrong routes, then he gets hurt. Like the goodwill is gone. So when it comes to Brandel, and let me be clear, I still disagree with them doing this, but I think I can explain it. So nobody get too mad at me like I'm running interference here. But with Brandel, he doesn't make that mistake, right? He knows how run IDs work because he's a veteran. And he's the problems that he's had have been related to snapping, either snapping or how to get set up. I talked about building your house. I talked a lot about building your house in the Blake Brandel one. For one, you have the snap over Carson Wentz's head. That can never, ever happen. I have seen JV sophomores get benched and never put back in for that happening once. I mean, that is an unacceptable standard, even at that level. So in the NFL, when that happens, I was a little bit expecting the Vikings to just be like, all right, I guess somebody else's job. Joe Huber, what do you got? Like, they would have been well within their rights to do that after that mistake. But the real nature of the problem with like the sacks he has given up and the blocks that he has missed has been that his hands are slow coming off of the snap. So I actually showed this I'm going to use my water bottle, pretend it's a football, right? So when you are snapping, you want to get everything on camera here. Snap and throw your hand at the same time, right? You want to throw the ball and your hand at the same time. So it's almost like it's both moves at the same time. Brandel is not doing that because he's not used to snapping. And I think at this point, because he's so new to center, they're probably just happy if the snap gets to where it's supposed to go. And they're probably not trying to dial in that technique on the fly in the middle of weeks. But that is causing his hands to be slow. So somebody like Jalen Carter gets his hands on him right away. And now you're accepting that impact and your hands haven't met yet. Well, once you're getting blown up like that, your hands are no longer enough if they're that late. And you're losing the rep. So that happened on 2 of the sacks that broke drives against the Eagles. So the take of, Blake Brandel ruined 3 red zone possessions is very true. And I would say it all stems from not being used to snapping. And then, you also have your smattering of problems we've had with Blake Brandel for the last few years of turning your hips too much on stunts and all the other stuff that would happen to him at guard and even back when he was playing tackle. That also kind of rears its ugly head and it adds up to like a lot of problems. And I guess what they're deciding is that those little issues, taking an L every once in a while, is better than somebody who doesn't know how to do a run ID. I would say that that's extraordinarily harsh to Michael Juergens, who was a little out of it in 1/2 in an international game, and I would say deserves another chance. Hopefully it becomes a moot point if Ryan Kelly can come off of IR soon. But that was the revelation that happened over the course of that video. Because I walked into that video not really knowing what I would find. And you can tell as I record it that I go, wait, I keep noticing this. Okay, so he's really having trouble with this. And I guess they also probably just want more veteran, like Brandel knows the plays and getting everybody lined up is a little bit easier when you have an older player in there. So maybe they just trust that a little bit more. But I think this whole thing has been extraordinarily harsh to Michael Juergens and extraordinarily forgiving of Blake Brandel for problems that are way harder to fix because you're trying to teach him a skill from scratch. With Juergens, you just go, oh, dude, put an arm into the D tackle only if you can get it. Like that's such a way easier coaching point. So, yeah, maybe that does bring us to the development part of this. Why can't you fix a problem in a young player? Why do you have to go to a veteran player just to get all those problems fixed from the get-go and then also ask him to do something he's super not used to and deal with a bunch of problems that stem from that? Sorry, that was really long. But
it was really long, but I think it's good. Here, we don't care about long. We want good. And that's why on a Thursday afternoon, we've got 62 people watching live. That's pretty cool. Last thing I want to talk about, Luke, is J.J. McCarthy. And there is so much mystery behind what we're going to see from this offense with McCarthy at the helm. We did not see him play with either Christian Darrisaw or Jordan Addison, and we haven't seen him since September 14th. Nearly 2 months later, we're finally getting
with 6 days of the J.J. McCarthy era.
Yeah, and it's a very interesting conversation to have because one of the biggest critiques I've had about Kevin O'Connell was his lack of willing to adjust his offense based on who's playing quarterback. And all the credit to him. It may not feel like he made a lot of adjustments for Carson Wentz. He made a ton of adjustments.
He tried, man.
He did. A lot of RPOs, a lot of one read, like Justin Jefferson on one side, and then he's got a backside screen where he can just dump it off, and he continued to miss those passes. Oh, my gosh. A lot of easy buttons that Wentz would just either see and not throw, like the CJ Ham play, or he would just miss, like that Jordan Addison. It looked like the Stephon Diggs 2-point conversion from the 2018 tie in Lambeau Field, where you got the motion and then sprint back out to the same side.
What a pull.
I was at that game live. Oh, what a game to be at live, let me tell you. But
I was there too. We were there together.
Oh, sick.
I left early.
Yeah.
I thought it was over.
Yeah, we stayed in the Dells, so we had a 3.5 hour drive. But let me tell you, it was worth it because a Motel 6 in Appleton was $400. We spent $500 to spend 2 nights in the Dells. Totally.
Yeah, that'll happen over there.
Yeah, so I'm very intrigued at what the Vikings are going to do for McCarthy this time around. Are they just going to run the offense because that's what they trusted him with initially, or are they going to add a lot of these like little quick hitters? Because I think fans and I don't blame them. They view quick game as quick slants. And the Vikings really don't do a lot of that. They've done a couple here and there, and some of their slants are more like short posts. But when I look at the quick game stuff, it's about finding easy buttons. The opening play against the Falcons, where it was that Jalen Naylor speed out. Like McCarthy just had bad footwork there, and that's why that play didn't work nearly as well as it could have. What do you expect from Kevin O'Connell with this new J.J. McCarthy era starting? Because it's like part 2 of his first season.
It's going to be really important how it starts. This is what I was talking about with Matt Derry on the Locked On crossover, which went up this morning. It's going to be extraordinary. Like the first couple of drives will be very important. I would be irate if Kevin O'Connell showed up and tried a shot play. 1st and 10 on the first drive. You have to get a couple of little nice, easy things for J.J. McCarthy. When he was on the podium, he was asked twice. I think someone wasn't paying attention and asked him the same question about the film from the first 2 games and what he learned from those first 2 games and what he's learned kind of being on the bench watching Carson Wentz. And the emphasis has clearly been on, the power of the little simple kind of basics. Just do the basics right. Get your feet in the right place, deliver the ball, and not try to do every single thing and take it all in one bite. Just run the play that is called, get to your drop back, execute what is in front of you, and watch how the offense moves. That's kind of what he got to see from Carson Wentz when it went wrong with Carson Wentz, it was always because Wentz was leaving, the train was leaving the tracks. He was always when he went off script, things would go terrible, and he would go off script way too often, and that was my main critique of him. So I want to see that come into play with McCarthy, and you need plays where that's possible. You can't have plays where everyone's running a 40-yard route and then say, but why didn't you do the simple things? Well, you couldn't. You were waiting for guys to get open, and there's only one kind of throw that kind of play creates, right? And it's a hard one. Give him your staples, give him your easy stuff. They spammed the flat with Carson Wentz. They didn't do slants. They did a lot of stick flat, curl flat, that allowed Carson Wentz to basically first read, is Addison there, ball in his hands on the sideline, make a guy miss, you get a good play. Or just get the edge and get your 6 yards, right? They did a ton of that. I would hope to see quite a bit of that as well with McCarthy, because it's a nice, easy completion. Run choice, that's another huge one. Just a little bit of choice. The Vikings have kind of abandoned choice. I think they feel like teams are too keyed up on it. Teams are too aware that they run choice, and so they've stopped doing it. But the point of a staple is that it works even when the defense sees it coming. And choice is kind of meant to be one of those plays where it goes against the leverage. You can see it coming all you want, but you have to pick a leverage, and choice is going to run against that leverage. So they should, I think, go back to some of those easier plays and try to set up rhythmic completions, and then try to expand and build on it as the game goes on. And hopefully by the end of the second quarter, then you're running the intermediate plays and you're trying to get chunks and you're trying to go for explosives. But you have to get the quarterback comfortable first. This is not a unique thing to J.J. McCarthy. It is wild that Kevin O'Connell was not giving that to McCarthy first. You have to get your quarterback in rhythm. It is like a cliche of broadcasts that you've been hearing for 35 years. You have to get your quarterback in rhythm, and they haven't really allowed JJ to do that. And I think really it's Kevin O'Connell saying, thinking he can put the weight of the world on his 22-year-old shoulders and being proven wrong in that. And I think a lot of the problems this year broadly can be chalked up to Kevin O'Connell thinking too much of players that could not answer that call, whether it's Justin Skule or Blake Brandel, or Javon Hargrave or JJ McCarthy. You have to at some point be honest about what your guys can and can't do and what you need to do to get them in those places to succeed.
It's going to be really interesting to see how O'Connell and Flores kind of gear up against this Lions team that, I'm going to be honest, they feel like a juggernaut, but if you are playing well in the right spots, they're a beatable football team. But that's a lot of ifs. Can the Vikings finish at the quarterback? Can they cover long enough? Can they prevent Amon-Ra St. Brown from just running 5 yards, stopping, and then getting 10 yards? Can they stop the running game? Can they get J.J. McCarthy set up for success? And I think there are a lot of questions, and we're going to find out if they have answers, because if they don't, it's going to be 3-5, and it's going to feel to a lot of people, then I mean, it already is for some, that the sky is falling. And I'm not super concerned short term. I'm very concerned short term, but I'm not super concerned long term. We'll find out what that ends up looking like. But Luke, any final thoughts before we kind of take off?
Those were all the things all the big rants and spiels I wanted to get out here. I think the trends of this season are the kinds of trends you can break a lot of streaks with one good game. They haven't scored in the first half in 4 games. They haven't won in Ford Field in 5 games. Break some streaks. Go prove that you're not what I am writing you off as.
I agree completely. This is going to be a fun one. And if the Vikings get the win, it's going to completely shift all the vibes surrounding this team. And it's a division game. Never count out a divisional opponent on either side of the football. And we've seen weirder things. The Lions almost lost to the Bears on Thanksgiving if it weren't for Matt Eberflus being an absolute buffoon. So
yeah, Bengals beat the Steelers, right? Like,
yeah.
Oh, weird in the division.
Did you see that Andrew Filipponi said if the Bengals were to win that game, that he'd get his nipples pierced, and then he did it? And
did he really?
He did it at a bar with like a bunch of people watching it and like filmed it and stuff. You know what? I give him credit. He talked the talk and he talked a bunch of stuff, and then he actually did it. Like, I give him props for that, because a lot of people would have just run away and not did it, but he did. It was weird and kind of, not creepy, but creepy. And you know what? He lived up to it. We need more people who live up to what they say. Dave, before we head out, do you have anything for us?
No, I just would love to talk about Chris Cooper at a future date.
We can absolutely get that set up. When there's a little less to talk about, I think we should have a longer conversation about Cooper and it's a
different conversation in the offseason, I'll tell you that. But the mid-season thing is probably just kind of throwing kerosene on a fire to try to douse it.
Pretty much. Thank you very much, Luke. Make sure you go check out Locked On Vikings and subscribe to Luke's Patreon, patreon.com/Luke Braun NFL. I subscribe personally, and it's some of the best stuff out there in the realm of Vikings coverage. Plus, you get to see the film on stuff, which we're not able to show you here because they are banning people left and right from showing YouTube stuff on YouTube. So we're not going to take that risk. Don't forget, Real Forness Show tonight, 6:05 Central Time, and we'll be back next week with another X's and SKOLs. One thing we say at the end, SKOL Vikings, baby.
SKOL Vikings. Thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, and ring the bell, and share this episode with your friends and even your enemies. We'd love it. Thanks for watching Vikings First and SKOL. We are part of the Fans First Sports Network, and we appreciate each and every one of you. SKOL.